Chapter 25. In the height of the Big Depression, the Seattle Traction Company suffered severe financial difficulties. While I admit that Dorothy and I were largely responsible, I feel justified in saying that Mr. Morrison's questionable marketing techniques in penny candy were partly to blame. The long series of events that led up to it began when I was 10. Mama was reading a newspaper article about a girl who was to put Seattle on the world swimming map for years. Helene Madison, a 15-year-old Green Lake girl, set a new world swimming record. She learned to swim at the park department lessons. Now she swims at Crystal Pool under Ray Daughters, the greatest coach in the country. "Oh boy, I wish we could see her," we all exclaimed. "She's going to swim in an exhibition at the next all-city swimming meet," Mama read. "We'll get to see her then." We had heard about Crystal Pool, the large natatorium in downtown Seattle, from the time that we had begun racing. Lifeguards at Seward Park said that to be on the team, there was the goal of every swimmer. Crystal's a swimmer's heaven. It don't matter a whit about the rain. You can train every day and never get wet, because it's covered by a huge glass dome. Everybody wants to train there, but they only take the best. You gotta just about break a world's record or something. Yeah, but it helps if you're from Green Lake. Most of the champions are from Green Lake. We knew about Green Lake. Strange as it may seem, in a city surrounded by great bodies of water, the head of the Seattle Swimming Beach pecking order was this piddling lake located in the northern, heavily populated residential area. According to the swimmers at the other 10 beaches, Green Lake got the best of everything: the best coaches, the best bathhouse, and the best swimmers. Photographers went there for pictures, and writers went there for stories. By comparison, the beaches on Lake Washington were considered backwaters, and the beaches on Elliott Bay the edge of the Arctic Circle. "It's the close-in location, yeah, but the greatest factor is the warm temperature," our lifeguard said. We knew. Mama had taken us swimming there. The temperature was so heavenly that we thought we were in California. The next day, however, we had developed a rash. All the kids that swam there had it. The lifeguards at our beach explained, "Green Lake is polluted and should be closed to swimming, but it's something the city officials choose to ignore." Papa was well acquainted with the facts. Some time back, the shoreline was leveled and lowered by about 7 feet. That cut off its outlet through the Raven Ravine. As more houses were built, more of the springs and creeks that fed the lake were cut off, and now it's just a stagnant pond. On the day of the exhibition, thousands of people lined the shore to watch the new world champion. She was tall and well-built, and her stroke was smooth and effortless. As the crowd cheered, Mama whispered to me, "She looks like you, Fran. You could be mistaken for her." The remark filled my head with dreams. Someday I would swim at Crystal Pool with Helene Madison, under the world's greatest coach. People might even mistake me for her. After the swim meet in the summer of 1929, we tried out for the Crystal team, and all 3 of us made it. We were ecstatic. Ray Daughter reiterated what Mama had said, that I looked and swam like Helen. It was a remark that I was to hear often. It made me feel good about being big. Swimming at Crystal with the world-class swimmers opened up a whole new world. To get to the pool, we had to ride the streetcar across town. We had to commit ourselves to rigorous training, swimming laps, working on kickboards, practicing turns, and swimming time trials. On Sunday mornings after a hard workout, the coaches would announce free time. That was when the boys would turn wild and push, pull, throw, dunk, bang, and bruise us poor girls, until we were so bedraggled we could barely pull ourselves to the dressing room. It was such fun, except that we couldn't get back at the boys. Then, Dora dreamed up a form of retaliation, which was accomplished while the boys were diligently swimming their laps, and the coaches were occupied elsewhere. As the boys swam to the edge and turned, we would jump in and catch them by their big toes. It was a marvelous thing. It took so little energy to inflict so much pain. A simple twist would send them slapping the water, begging for mercy. Once we had them securely in tow, or in tow, as we called it, they couldn't break loose, so we were free to practice this delightful torture for as long as we pleased. We knew that our good health depended on good timing. If our timing was good, the couches would appear just seconds after our victims were released. We would be swimming like precious angels, while our victims would be holding their toes. When our timing was bad, Dora and I ended up in the doghouse. For training, we were provided with swimsuits and towels, but we were told that for the races we needed one piece, sleek-fitting silk suits instead of heavy wool. We had never seen racing suits before, but after our first-time trials, where all the champions wore them, Fleur described them to Papa with a fair amount of accuracy. "My gosh, you can see right through them!" "Yeah, you can see everybody's belly button," I added. Dor defined it further. "And then some." Mama passed him the pickles. "I hear the officials are considering closing the pool to the public during the time trials." "Yeah, they attract peeping toms," Fleur said. When Mama discovered what was attracting the peeping toms, she had second thoughts. But when the coaches pointed out that we would cut seconds off of our times in the sleek suits, she gave in. "But keep your arms crossed," she demanded. Mama had misgivings about us riding the streetcars alone. My accident was still on her mind. But after she rode with us several times and gave us instructions, she left us on our own. Student tokens cost 2.5 cents, and we bought a quarter's worth every Monday at the candy store. Occasionally, at the end of the week, we would have a token left over, and Mr. Morrison would let us redeem it for 2 cents worth of candy. As you can imagine, we were constantly looking for ways to have tokens left over. The trouble began after Fleur started high school, and Dor and I were on our own. We had just settled into our seats one day when Dor opened her hand and said, "Hey, look, I forgot to put my token in the box." "Well, you can put it in when we get off." Dorothy agreed, but when we got to Crystal, Dorothy opened her little fist again. "Guess what?" I was about to lecture her on morals when she offered to split the profit. "Just think of how many jawbreakers we can buy." I didn't allow my mind a moment to think. At first, I had misgivings about Dorothy hiding behind me while I paid my fare. However, it wasn't long before we were hardened criminals. This went on for some months. Then, one evening, we received a jolt. Mama was helping us on our hope chests, embroidering little kittens doing their daily chores on flour sack dish towels, washing on the Monday towel, ironing on the Tuesday towel, and on through 7 different towels. Mama had pointed out that if we were diligent and finished 1 towel a month, we would have them done in a year and get the summer off. Papa was reading the newspaper and making his usual comments about bank failures and other things of interest. Naturally, I didn't bat an eye when he quoted, "The traction company is losing money." Mama was crossing some stitches that Dor had left uncrossed. That's too bad, but it seems that everyone is losing money." Dor asked, "Who is the traction company?" Fleur said, "The traction company is the streetcar company, dummy." Papa continued, "Investigations have shown that they're losing money because they're not getting enough money in the fare boxes." I was making a French knot on my Tuesday kitten's apron when the realization struck me. I drove the needle halfway to the bone on my index finger. Mama said, "What did they expect during the Depression?" Papa said, "They expect to get more money in the fare box." I was trying to conceal the fact that I was bleeding all over my Tuesday towel. I looked at Dor in panic, but she seemed blissfully unaware. "What are hope chests for?" she asked. Mama began the delicate answer. "Well, every girl hopes that if she gets a chest full of lovely linens, someday Cupid will come and—" Papa didn't go for delicate answers. "Hell, you're hoping for a husband so you won't have to sponge off your poor old father for the rest of your lives." When I finally got Dor alone, I was in a panic. "We're in trouble. Didn't you hear what Papa said about the streetcars losing money?" "So what if the streetcars lose money?" "They're holding a big investigation, the FBI, I think, and they already know why they're losing money." "So why are they losing money?" "Because they're not getting enough money in the fare box." A bell rang in Dor's head. "Flying Finnegan, does that mean?" "Of course it means that. You haven't seen anyone else fudging on the fare, have you?" "One thing is certain, the newspaper reports made us religious." Every day we prudently put our tokens into the fare box. While they tinkled down the slot, we smiled beguilingly at the conductor. So sweet did we become that he began calling us his little sweethearts. However, our troubles with the traction company had only begun. Several months later, Papa was reading news items while Mama was patiently untangling our embroidery. "Here's something more about the streetcars and their financial condition. Children will not be allowed to use school tokens, except for going to and from school." "Does that mean we have to use big man tokens for going to the pool?" Dor asked. Papa acted as if such a thought hadn't occurred to him. "No, swimming is a part of your education. You can still use school tokens to go there and home again." The next day, we learned differently. The conductor, who was not calling us his little sweethearts anymore, had interpreted the order differently. He insisted on the full fare. We made the mistake of quoting Papa. "Our father is a lawyer, and he says he can ride for the school fare." Well, you can tell your old man he doesn't know what he's talking about, even if he is a lawyer. Just to show us how kind he was, he let us ride that day. But by tomorrow, we reported to Papa at dinner, the conductor said we absolutely must have full fare tomorrow. Papa wasn't in a very good mood in the first place. He had been telling Mama how many more banks had closed, and that Hoover had to do something, and that the roast was too tough. Now they're trying to get a few measly pennies more by overcharging my children. Tenny, you didn't cook this roast long enough. Cut it into smaller pieces, Mama suggested. I would if I could get my fork into it. Damn, why do I always get this blasted fork? Because Franny set the table, Dor said. Papa evidently wasn't listening. A perfectly good piece of meat, and you ruin it because you didn't cook it long enough. Meat is hard to come by these days. I guess you'll have to blame Hoover for that, Mama said. Dor brought us back to the subject at hand. The conductor said that if we don't pay full fare, he'll throw us off the streetcar. Papa stabbed the air with his funny fork. He wouldn't dare. The next day, we boarded the streetcar with our school tokens in hand, acting sweeter than Rosie O'Grady. Before we could put the tokens in the fare box and deliver Papa's message, we were back on the street. I didn't think he'd dare, I said. What'll we do now? Dor asked. Wait for the next streetcar. Thus began a very hectic period for us little soldiers caught in the crossfire. We were usually successful on the first leg of our journey, but when we would board a streetcar at about 5:30 with our skin puckered and our hair dripping wet, it was hard to convince a conductor that we had just come from school. It got so we were spending most of our lives on downtown street corners. We implored Papa for more money to buy big man tokens, but Papa didn't believe our predicament. He thought we were just after more allowance. On top of all of this came the time trial which rocked the Seattle swimming world. Well, that might be an overstatement. To be more accurate, it rocked my swimming world, because I got all the blame. Unfortunately, I was not in very good graces with the coaches at the time, because Dor and I had been involved in horseplay. One Sunday morning, the pool had been cleared of all swimmers. The waves had settled, and the surface was as smooth as glass. Complete silence reigned. All attention was focused upon this great world champion who was going to try to set another world record. Helene stood at attention in her black silk racing suit, tall and powerfully built. I was aware of the identification that I had with her. I had always thought of big as a handicap, but from Helene, I had come to realize that big could be an advantage. I had watched her carefully, trying to imitate her every move. At the sound of the gun, Helene started her swim. Ray daughters and the other world-renowned coaches were clumping along in their clogs, keeping one eye on Helene and the other on their stopwatches. The team was sitting soberly on the side of the pool, observing. We three Bighams had one distraction. We were watching the door to the men's locker room. We were expecting Joe Whitman, a friend from Seward Park, to come and swim with us. We had recommended him to the coaches as a good prospect for the team. When Helene was nearing the end of her swim, and the excitement was mounting, we saw Joe come from the dressing room. We started to wave, but before we could get his attention, he spotted Helene, who had swum up to the side of the pool and was about to make her final spectacular turn and head down the home stretch. Joe walked over into forbidden territory. We wanted to call out, but of course, being under the silence rule, we couldn't. As it turned out, he wouldn't have heard us anyway because the coaches were yelling down at her, "You're going to make it!" Then, Joe did the unthinkable. He dove in and began swimming beside her. Everyone was horrified. What impertinence. The coaches began yelling and waving, but Joe was totally unaware. When it appeared that he was losing ground, what person wouldn't be losing ground swimming against the great champion? He did the even more unthinkable. He grabbed her toe and pulled her off course. Then he swam on top of her and ducked her and stepped on her and held her down. We could hear the stopwatches clicking wildly and the clogs clattering. We knew that the record book had just slammed shut. We could hear moans and groans from people fainting dead away. The pressure in the building was so extreme that we expected the glass dome of Crystal Pool to shatter and come crashing down on all of us. I was confessing my sins, positive that my time on Earth was over, when Joe finally turned to swim away. Helene surfaced, spitting and sputtering. She grabbed Joe by the hair and began to bat him around. She did things to Joe that he hadn't even thought to do to her. It was a pitiful thing to watch. "Who do you think you are?" Helene screamed. Poor Joe. Every time he opened his mouth to explain who he thought he was, she ducked him again. Finally, she let go. Looking like a drowned rat, he spotted us and swam over. Helene and the coaches demanded an explanation. That's when he got the opportunity to explain who he thought he was, or rather, who he thought Helene was. His words came out loud and clear. "Fran, I thought she was you." My euphoria was short-lived. I got all the blame as usual. The coaches postponed Joe's tryout indefinitely, and a new rule was made about us Bigham girls inviting our friends to come during training sessions. The rule was don't. Unfortunately, that was not my last experience with mistaken identity. One morning, Mama called upstairs. "There's a big, beautiful picture of Fran on the front page of the sports section." I was down the stairs in record time, tearing into the paper. The picture was a montage of several divers from the different bathing beaches, grouped around one central figure. The large caption read, "Frances Bigham of Seward Park." Mama said, "What a beautiful picture. And won't Papa be proud? They spelled your name right for once." Dor said, "Gee, Fran, what a great arch in your back." In that instant, I admitted to myself what I had suspected from the first. Although I was one of the divers in the picture, and had indeed made a beautiful dive, the central figure wasn't me. It was, of all people, a Green Lake girl. Before I could think of what to do, Mrs. Williams came in. "Tenny, have you seen the paper today?" Of course Mama had seen the paper. I wanted to interrupt, but before I had a chance, there was a call on the phone. "Hey, what a great picture." "Well, thank you, but—" The girl talked on. "It's the best picture that anyone from Seward Park has ever had on the sports page." If true, and this was debatable, it was due to Seward Park's lowly position in the Seattle swimming beach's pecking order. By the time I was eating my oatmeal mush, Papa had called from the office to report that my picture was hanging in the rickety elevator. When we went to the beach, there was the picture, hanging on the bulletin board. That afternoon, a swimmer from Green Lake called. "Hey, that's not a picture of you. That's a picture of Jackie Garton, Green Lake girl. What are you trying to do, steal Green Lake's stuff?" That was just the beginning. Instead of enjoying my 15 minutes of fame, I was in a dilemma. I tried explaining to Mama, but she didn't believe it. Maybe because she would have to tell Mrs. Williams and all the neighbors. I wanted to tell Papa, but I knew that he had boasted to the elevator man and all the lawyers in the Coleman building. "That's my girl Franny. I taught her how to dive." I wanted to tell the Seward swimmers, but they would have to admit that Green Lake had bested us once again. I suffered. It was as if I was guilty of some dastardly trick of identity theft. What recourse did I have? Could I stand on a soapbox at Seward Park or Crystal Pool and proclaim to the swimming world, "It isn't me"? Should I call the newspaper and tell them that they had made a mistake? Finally, Dor, who had suspected me from the first, helped ease my guilt. What the newspaper says is always true.